I stood in front of my new home in Eugene, Oregon. A two-bedroom white bungalow with a wooden fence and pale purple wisteria climbing over the porch. The crisp early fall breeze brushed my hands just as the sound of engines echoed from the end of the street. My father's sea-moved SUV pulled in first, followed by my brother Keith's aging silver minivan. My mother stepped out first, her floral dress fluttering, waving like this was some kind of joyful family reunion. Her face glowed with expectation, nearly blooming. Keith's wife rushed to unbuckle the twins from the back seat. Keith stayed in the car, eyes glued to the rearview mirror, fixing his hair. Of course he did. I stepped off the porch, hand already resting on the doorknob. "This isn't where we were supposed to be, Isabel," my father frowned, eyes sweeping the quiet street and the small house behind me. "Glenwood, Dad. This is my house." Silence. Heavy, like the air just before a storm breaks. "What the hell is this?" Keith suddenly shouted, loud enough to make a few neighbors peek through their windows. "Where are we supposed to stay? How are we supposed to squeeze into this matchbox?" I opened the door, calmly. "You're not staying here. This house isn't for you." My mother's mouth dropped open. Heather froze on the first step, still holding the baby. The kids looked at each other from inside the minivan, confused. My father stepped forward slowly, his voice low but simmering. "The Oakhurst house is already under contract. It's in your name. The seller's expecting signatures this week." "I never agreed to that," I replied. "You let us believe it was happening," my mother hissed, her voice trembling. Whether from guilt or performance, I couldn't tell. "You said you were considering it." "I said I was exploring my options," I corrected. "This is the one I chose." Keith marched onto the porch, face flushed, fists clenched. "You're seriously abandoning your family? Leaving us scrambling with 3 kids and no place to go?" I looked him straight in the eye, the same man who burned through 3 lifelines and still stood here, palm outstretched like it was a birthright. "No, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just refusing to be used anymore." I shut the door, not forcefully, but with purpose. The last thing I heard before it latched was Keith shouting behind me, "How selfish do you have to be to pull something like this, Isabel?" Inside, the silence came instantly. Not cold, just calm. For the first time in years, the space around me felt like mine. No one cutting in, no shouting, no footsteps echoing where they didn't belong. I leaned back against the locked door, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline, but inside, I was certain. I didn't owe them anything. Not a house, not a bedroom, not even an explanation. And they knew it, they just never thought I'd say it out loud. I was never a difficult child, and maybe that's exactly why I was overlooked from the very beginning. Growing up in the suburbs of Spokane, Washington, my family wasn't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. We lived in a gray-roofed, 3-bedroom house with a backyard big enough for a wooden swing and a small vegetable garden. But inside that house, there was one thing that was never shared equally: attention. Keith, my older brother by 2 years, was always called the great hope of the Callahan family, not because he was especially talented, but simply because he was a boy. My mother once said bluntly, "Boys need investment. Girls just need to know how to manage." I'll never forget when I was in 4th grade and won first place in the state spelling bee. My parents didn't come to the finals because Keith had a school soccer game. When I brought home the gold medal, my mom barely glanced at it before asking, "Did Keith score a goal?" He didn't, but he still got taken out to our favorite steakhouse to celebrate, while I ate frozen pizza at home. I got used to that kind of imbalance. When I aced my biology exam, they said the test was probably easy. When Keith got a B- in math, it was a household event. See, all he needed was a little push. Keith always got investments. At 15, my parents gave him a used red Jeep. When I turned driving age, my mom handed me a bus pass and said, "Walking builds patience." I heard that line all through high school, even when I had to walk in the rain to the library because no one had time to drive me to a group project. I never asked for much. I knew asking was pointless. When I got accepted to the University of Washington's interior design program with a partial scholarship, I cried tears of joy. My mom's reaction? Swim in a glass of water. Why that major? How do you expect to make a living decorating houses? And Keith? He went to a private business school nearby, no scholarship, but my parents did their best. That best included draining the college savings account meant for both of us to cover his second year's tuition. I only found out when I called the financial office to pay for my fall semester, and they said flatly, the account was empty. No warning, no apology. I called my dad. He replied curtly, "You can apply for more aid. Your brother doesn't have a backup plan. He needs support." I sat in my dorm room for hours, stunned, phone limp in my hand, heart pounding like something had just been ripped out of me. I finally understood. In their eyes, everything I achieved was just natural, something they didn't have to worry about. But Keith, no matter what, was always worth the extra help because he needed it. Didn't I ever need help too? After that, I picked up 2 jobs, a morning shift as a library assistant and evening hours packing online orders for a handmade flower shop. I learned to make 1 packet of ramen last 3 days. I told no one, not even my best friend. I didn't want pity. I wanted to stand on my own. Not for them, but for me. Keith never graduated. He dropped out his final year, saying his startup idea was too promising to wait. And once again, my parents emptied part of their retirement savings to invest in the business. Unsurprisingly, it failed in 8 months. By then, I was interning at an interior design firm in Portland, renting a shoebox-size room but managing everything on my own. I didn't go home that Christmas. My mom sent a passive-aggressive text. "The family feels empty without you. You're the big sister. You should think of your brother." I didn't reply. I had been thinking of him my whole life. And now, here I am, standing inside the first house I bought myself after a decade of grinding and sacrifice. They're standing outside, furious about not getting a piece of something they never lifted a finger to build. And me, for the first time, I'm on the inside, locking the door. Not to run, but because I finally chose myself. I remember that day clearly. It was a Friday in early August, the temperature hitting 95 degrees. I was sitting in the corner of a cafe near campus, laptop open, bank card in hand, ready to transfer the payment for my final semester's tuition. I had planned everything down to the dollar. After nearly a year of working without a single real break, I had saved enough. This was my last term before earning a bachelor's degree in interior design, a dream I had since 6th grade. The screen flashed an error. Transaction failed, insufficient funds. I tried again, same result. I opened my banking app. The tuition account balance was under $300. I blinked, once, then twice. Just 3 days earlier, it had over $6,000. Immediately called the bank. They confirmed the full amount had been withdrawn 3 days ago at a branch in Spokane, by check. Signed by Elaine Callahan, my mother. My chest tightened like someone had reached inside and squeezed my lungs. I called her. She answered after 3 rings. "Oh, Isabel, I'm at the market with the kids. Everything okay?" I gripped the phone. "You withdrew all my tuition money." She paused for a few seconds, then sighed, as if she were the one who had been hurt. "You know Keith's in a tough spot. This startup really has potential. I thought you'd understand." I cut her off, my voice shaking with anger. "You thought I'd understand you taking every cent I worked for all year to fund a lawn care app?" "Don't say it like that, Isabel," she snapped. "It's a family project. Families help each other. You can apply for more student aid. Keith is putting everything into this opportunity." I lowered the phone from my ear just to breathe. I wasn't shaking because I was broke. I was shaking because I was betrayed. Again. She kept talking like she was the victim here. "You've always been strong. Keith's not like that. You're always fine, and your brother, well, he needs more support." I said nothing else. I hung up. That evening, I worked the night shift at the flower shop. While assembling a wedding bouquet, I silently calculated how many hours I'd need to replace what she took. I knew I wouldn't drop out. Not for them. I applied for an emergency student loan and cut every non-essential expense. No coffee, no eating out, no streaming, no new shoes, even though my current pair had a split sole. Every morning, I got up at 5 a.m. to open the campus library, went to class, then worked at the shop until 10 p.m. 3 months passed, I survived, I studied, I told no one. Then my mom called and invited me home for Thanksgiving. Your dad's roasting that cheese stuffed turkey you love. Keith's bringing the projector. The kids can't wait to see Aunt Isabel. I almost laughed. Mom, I'm barely surviving after losing all my tuition money, and you're talking to me about cheese? She chuckled lightly as if nothing had happened. You always manage somehow. Thanksgiving's for coming together, not holding grudges over money. Grudges over money, of course that's how she'd frame it. I didn't say I'd come. But in the end, I still bought a bus ticket from Portland to Spokane, not because I wanted to, but because I wasn't yet strong enough to say no. That night, Keith showed up almost an hour late because of an online meeting with investors. He walked in dressed like he'd just stepped off a tech pitch stage, hugged Mom, kissed Dad on the forehead, and clapped me on the shoulder. You holding up okay? You look kinda tired. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm working 2 jobs a day just to survive. What about you? How's that plant care app going? He shrugged, grabbing a piece of garlic bread. On hold. But don't worry, I've got a new idea. A platform to connect contractors to homeowners in real time. I stopped listening. I scooped up some mashed potatoes and swallowed it like gravel. That night, I sat in my old room, now converted into a playroom for the kids, and made myself a promise. The next time anyone asks me to sacrifice again, I'll remember this feeling. The cold sting of being forgotten, the pain of kindness wrung dry, and I'll choose differently. I graduated on a gray, rainy June day. The whole campus cheered beneath umbrellas, while I stood quietly at the end of the row, clutching a diploma that had cost me every ounce of energy in my youth. No one from my family came to the ceremony. My mom said she couldn't afford a plane ticket. Keith was tied up in a strategic meeting. My dad didn't answer my texts. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even sad. I just quietly left campus, tucked the diploma into my backpack, and caught the overnight bus back to Portland. A place where, for the first time, no one knew me as Keith Callahan's little sister. The city welcomed me with honking horns, the scent of wet asphalt, and rows of buildings packed so tight it felt like there had never been room to breathe. I rented a tiny room in a shared house in the southeast, splitting a kitchen with 3 strangers, with a window that faced nothing but a stained brick wall. But to me, that was freedom. I started from the bottom, office assistant at an interior design company that built model homes for real estate developers. My job was mostly coffee runs, organizing the materials closet, and filling out Excel spreadsheets. I didn't complain. I was the first to arrive, the last to leave. Every evening after work, I took on freelance jobs, floor plan designs for small real estate agents. At first, just a few $100s, then thousands. I created a spreadsheet called Home Fund. Every month, I transferred 65% of my income into that account. No touching, no exceptions. I skipped weekend hangouts, turned down brunch invites with excuses about tight deadlines. I sent a gift to my best friend's wedding in Florida instead of flying out. I knew that if I stepped back even once, that dream could drift another year away, maybe forever. 7 years passed. I moved 5 times. Each move brought me closer to a real home. I chose rentals that needed no repairs, no repainting, no new fridge. I didn't need pretty. I needed practical. Every time I got a bonus, I saved it. I opened a high-interest savings account and set the PIN to the date I lost my tuition, so I'd never forget why I started. When I turned 31, my boss, Gwen, called me into her office. "Isabel, I have a proposal. Would you like to lead a design team for a new client on the West Side?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Me? As the team lead? You've been doing the job for 2 years, you've just been missing the title." I nodded. Right after the meeting, I submitted a pre-approval request to increase my mortgage limit. A week later, I got approved. I cried in the parking lot. That night, I printed a map of the city and pinned it to my wall. I marked every neighborhood, places where morning sunlight hit the kitchen windows, where the maples turned crimson in fall, where it was quiet, but still close to a bus stop. I started touring houses every weekend. Some were beautiful but too big. I didn't need 6 bedrooms. Others fit the budget but felt like basements. Dark, cramped, and joyless. I said no to all of them. Not because I was picky, but because I hadn't worked this hard for 7 years just to settle. Then I found the one. On a crisp, clear Saturday morning, a 1,920 bungalow with 2 bedrooms, brown shingle roof, sunlit windows, and a backyard just big enough for a patch of mint. Nothing fancy, nothing showy, but when I walked in, I knew instantly. This is where I belonged. I handwrote a letter to the sellers telling them about my journey to independence and why this home wasn't just a roof over my head, it was a place to begin again. 2 days later, I got the call. My offer was accepted. When I held the keys in my hand, I stood on the front step and looked inside. The house was empty, with peeling paint and creaky wood floors, but inside me there was a fullness I had never felt before. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it online. I just set my suitcase down in the corner, opened the windows to let in the light, then sat on the floor and breathed. For the first time in years, I inhaled in a space that was entirely mine. I returned to Spokane in mid-October, when maple leaves had begun to blanket the yard and the air carried that cold, earthy scent of the coming holiday season. My mom had called a week earlier, her voice unusually cheerful. "We're throwing a big dinner this year. Your dad's grilling the turkey outside. Keith said he wants you there to share the good news." Whatever that good news was, I didn't know, but I agreed to come, partly out of curiosity and partly because I was finally calm enough to face them without fearing I'd be dragged back into my old role. I stepped into the old house that Saturday afternoon. The living room was a mess as usual. Toys everywhere, the TV blasting some high-pitched cartoon. Heather was spoon-feeding the baby while the twins chased each other around the dining table. Keith wasn't there. My mom peeked out from the kitchen, smiling brightly. "You're here! Keith will be back soon with a big surprise. I hope you'll like it." I smiled faintly, walked in, and set a bottle of wine on the table. My dad waved vaguely from the couch, eyes glued to his phone, like I had just crossed the street, not returned home after 7 years. An hour later, Keith showed up. Classic Keith. Blue dress shirt unbuttoned down 3 notches, brand new white sneakers, and a thin folder tucked under his arm. He hugged Mom, patted Dad on the back, then came straight to me. "Got a minute? We want to show you something." I glanced at Heather, who had stayed silent the entire time. She looked down, saying nothing. Keith spread the folder out on the dining table. I recognized the heading immediately. Home loan proposal, Spokane Credit Union. Below it was a photo straight out of a magazine. Black tile roof, 7 front-facing windows, a double garage, and a backyard big enough to host a fire station. "This is the house we just put a deposit on. It's in the new development on the north side of the city, just 2 blocks from the elementary school. It's got a playroom for the kids, a huge basement, and even a studio up in the attic, so you could work from home." I stared at him without blinking. "Yeah, Mom and Dad are in. We just need you to be the primary applicant. You've got the best credit in the family. And since your income is stable, the bank approved the loan. I already sent $2,000 to hold the spot. Through Mom's account, of course." I turned to my mom. She smiled, a bit awkwardly. "Everything's ready. We just need your signature." "Hmm?" "I never agreed to this," I said slowly. Keith raised a hand, clearly ready with a rehearsed speech. "You don't understand, Isabel. The housing market is rising fast. $820,000 for a house like this is a steal. I'll send you at least $500 a month to help with the loan. Heather's going to pick up extra work too. And Mom and Dad will help with living costs." I laughed, not loudly, but enough to freeze everyone at the table. A near $1 million house and you think $500 a month is helping? Isabel, Mom cut in. You're the one in the best position in this family. You live alone, have no dependents. If you don't help, then who will? Help? I looked at each person in the room. For the past 7 years, who helped me when I lived off instant noodles to save every penny? Who helped me when I walked 6 miles because I couldn't afford gas? Who helped when you drained my tuition money for that ridiculous app scheme? Silence, except for the baby, who burst into tears after banging her spoon against the bowl. I took a breath. I came here to visit family, not to sign a mortgage for the entire bloodline. Keith tilted his head. Do you even realize what you're turning down? This is a chance for us to live close again, to rebuild our relationship. No, Keith, this is a chance for everyone to drain me a little more. And I'm out of patience. I folded the folder shut and slid it back to him. If you want the house that badly, buy it yourselves. But don't expect to use my name for a plan I never agreed to. I stood up. My mom started crying. My dad still didn't look up from his screen. Heather scooped up the baby, her head bowed, silent. As I reached the door, Keith shouted after me. Selfish. With family like you, we're better off without you. I didn't turn around, just smiled softly and whispered, Finally, someone said it. I left Spokane on Sunday morning on the 6:10 bus. No one came to see me off. Heather quietly closed the door after I pulled my suitcase across the threshold. Mom never came out of her room. Keith sent a single text at 1 a.m. You'll regret this. I didn't reply. During the 6-hour ride back to Portland, I stared out the window, watching the bare trees blur past like fragments of memory. There was a strange hollowness spreading through my chest, not sharp pain, but a strange, weightless calm. When the bus stopped at the final station, I got off with one suitcase, one old paper bag, and a decision I couldn't take back. That afternoon, I called Monica, the real estate agent who had shown me listings a few months earlier. Isabel, I thought you'd already picked something. I did, I said, just now. 2 days later, I signed the papers for a 2-bedroom bungalow in the Selwood Moorland neighborhood. It wasn't big, it wasn't ultra-modern, but it was bright with sunlight and no one else would be creeping into my dreams. I included a letter with the documents, saying that this wasn't just a house. It was the first time I'd ever lived in a space shaped by my choice. And it was approved. On move-in day, I didn't play celebration music. I just opened the door, set my suitcase on the bare wood floor, and drew the curtains to let the light in. I stood still for a full minute. The room was empty, but it wasn't cold. Every door frame, every crack, every faded patch of paint, it all belonged to me. No one else. I didn't post on social media. I didn't call to tell anyone. I kept it to myself like a sweet secret, something I'd never had in my family. A week later, I sent a message in the family group chat. Saturday, 2 p.m., I have something to share. Meet me at this address. No one responded, but I knew they would come, because if there was one thing my family never passed up, it was a chance to snoop or control. That afternoon, I wore a white button-down and jeans, hair pulled back, no makeup. I wanted to look simple and clear. No invitation, no disguise. At exactly 1:59, 2 familiar cars pulled up outside. Dad got out first, eyebrows furrowed as he glanced at the low trees. Mom followed, tugging a fur coat far too thick for the weather. Keith and Heather arrived with the 3 kids, carrying enough bags to look like they were moving in. What is this place? Mom frowned. Weren't we supposed to meet the agent at North Ridge? I smiled and opened the gate. This is my house. I bought it. And today I invited you to see it. Dad froze. Keith scoffed. This a joke? 2 bedrooms? Who's this for? I kept my tone calm. No one, just me. Mom's breathing quickened. What about the other house? Your father submitted the paperwork. Keith paid the deposit. The kids already picked their rooms. I looked at her, no longer afraid. They made choices, not me. I never promised. I never signed, and I don't owe anyone anything. Keith stepped forward, his voice sharpening. You just gonna leave the whole family hanging? That selfish? No, I cut in, eyes locked on his. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm finally done betraying myself. Silence. Tight as a stretched wire. I've lived alone long enough to understand freedom, and I won't trade that for the fake guilt this family uses to keep me chained. Mom's eyes welled up. So you're abandoning your parents, the kids? I took a deep breath. I'm not abandoning anyone, but if someone feels hurt because I choose to live my own life, that's not on me. I stepped back inside. The door isn't closed to anyone, but it's not open for control and manipulation either. I shut the door. Softly, with no slam, but the silence outside echoed loud and clear. That evening, I had a missed call from Aunt Laura, a text from Uncle Raymond, and one public Facebook post from Keith. Some people forget who helped them, forget who sacrificed for them. Good luck with your little house and cold heart. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone to validate my choice. I had already done that, with the key in my hand, and the peace behind this door, where no one pushed me down to lift someone else up. The message came on a Thursday night, just as I was sipping peppermint tea on the porch, surrounded by warm lights and the damp scent of wood after rain. Unknown number. Just a few simple words. Isabel, it's Heather. I changed my number. I just wanted to say, I understand, and I'm sorry. I stared at the screen. My heart didn't race. It didn't shatter. It just tightened a little, like something inside me had been waiting to unclench. I typed back slowly, "Thank you for saying that." 3 minutes later, she sent a photo. Mason, Ella, and little Lila sitting on a picnic blanket, grinning wide. Behind them was a patchy lawn, scattered leaves, a cheap plastic table, but filled with sunlight. We're temporarily renting a 2-bedroom apartment. It's small but peaceful. Keith found part-time work at a warehouse. I just started as a virtual assistant for a real estate firm. No one expects anything from me anymore, and I feel relieved. I read it again and again. Suddenly the image of Heather in my mind wasn't just the woman with a lowered head, silent during arguments. She looked like a mother, a wife, and now maybe someone learning to own her life. I didn't reply right away, but the next morning I sent her a new message. If you and the kids ever come to Portland, my door's always open. No pressure, no expectations. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, a gray rental car stopped in front of my house. Heather stepped out in a plain hoodie, holding Mason and Ella by the hand, little Lila on her hip. She smiled, not nervously, not awkwardly, but like someone who knew this wasn't a visit. It was a beginning. I opened the door, visibly moved. Was the drive okay? Better than I expected, she said, then chuckled. Lila slept all the way from Salem. The 3 kids burst into the backyard like someone had opened the gates. Ella squealed when she spotted the hammock I'd tied between 2 maple trees. Mason asked immediately, "Isabel, do you have Wi-Fi?" I laughed. "Yes, but only after you help me water the plants." That evening, I laid out a simple meal on the patio. Grilled chicken sandwiches, pickled cucumbers, and some butter cookies I'd baked that morning. We ate, laughed, and shared stories. No one interrupting, no one taking sides, no Keith, no Mom, no one to intrude, no one to silence. After the kids fell asleep in sleeping bags spread across the living room, Heather and I sat on the porch, each with a mug of hot tea. She spoke softly. "I know that day. Everyone was awful. Him, your parents. But back then, I didn't dare speak up. I thought staying quiet would make things pass." I looked at her, without blame. "You don't need to justify anything. You just need to live. And you're doing that now." Heather nodded, eyes slightly glassy. "You know, it was you who gave me the courage. You said no. You walked away. I never thought a woman in this family had the right to do that." I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "We're still learning, Heather, both of us." After that visit, we kept in touch more often. No pressure, no weight. Sometimes Heather sent a photo of Ella in the dress I'd sewn from leftover fabric, my first handmade piece. Other times, Mason would video call just to show off a robot he built from a discount kit. And sometimes I sent a photo back, Lila curled in my lap, crayon in hand, scribbling wildly on the porch wall. No one else in my family knew about those visits. I didn't share, Heather didn't either, not out of fear, but because we both understood the things worth treasuring sometimes need quiet to grow. We didn't talk about Keith, we didn't talk about my mother. We talked about work, growing cucumbers in foam boxes, saving up for the kid's new laptop. We talked like friends, not in-law sisters, not the chosen and the outsider. And I think, maybe for the first time in my life, I had a family bond that didn't require me to fight to belong. Spring in Portland always arrives gently, as if it doesn't want to disturb anyone. The sunlight is never too harsh, the rain never too long, and the daffodils in my front yard bloom right on time. Just enough to make me believe I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I painted the living room a soft gray moon, built my own bookshelves, and planted mint along the kitchen window ledge. Every morning I make coffee with a French press, crack open the window to let in the breeze, and work on my old but reliable laptop. No one wakes me up, no one asks why I'm still single, and no one tells me to think about others first. Work's steady. I've picked up a few freelance projects, enough to start saving for the Europe trip I've postponed 3 times. Taylor, my best friend, stops by now and then with a bottle of wine and a story from her office that always ends in laughter. My next-door neighbor, June, has started handing me a small bundle of herbs each week, along with unsolicited advice that somehow always lands right. One afternoon in May, I was wiping down the window glass when the doorbell rang. I thought it was Heather coming early, but when I opened the door, it was my mother. She wore a beige cardigan, hair neatly tied up, holding a box of homemade cookies. The scent of cinnamon and butter hit me instantly, pulling me back to elementary school winters, waiting for her to finish baking. The difference was, back then, she never called me down to have any. "Do you have a moment?" she asked. Her voice was even, not cold, but for the first time I heard something like hesitation. I nodded and stepped aside. We sat at the small dining table by the window, my usual spot for reading and tea. She placed the cookie box down and said nothing for a while. "Your home is lovely. Not fancy, but very you." I didn't respond. I let the silence do its job. Finally, she spoke. "I was wrong. For years, I thought pushing you would make you stronger. But really, I was just repeating what people once did to me." I looked at her, not to demand an apology, but to truly see if the woman who once made me believe my worth depended on pleasing others had finally realized what had been lost all those years. "When your father lost his job a few months ago," she continued, "I finally understood what it's like to stand in a house where no one hears you. I used to think your silence was stubbornness, but now I see maybe you were just used to never being asked what you wanted." I placed my hand on the table. I didn't reach for hers, but I didn't pull back either. I learned to stand alone, not because I wanted to, but because I had no other choice. She nodded, eyes misty. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know I'm trying to relearn how to be a mother. Not the way I was taught, but in a way you deserve." We didn't hug. We didn't need to. But when I offered to make her dinner, my own recipe for Italian pasta, we both knew some cracks can't be sealed, but they can let the breeze in and soften over time. That night, I watched her walk away under the porch light. I wasn't sure if she'd come back again, but this time, at least, she hadn't come to demand. She came to listen. And that, to me, was a beginning. A month later, I hosted a small gathering in my backyard. Just a few friends, Heather's kids, June and Taylor. No one mentioned Spokane. No one asked where Keith was. No one had to pretend. We laughed, played Name That Song. Lila colored the patio stones and called me Aunt Bella. I didn't correct her. As twilight fell, I stepped back, looking at the little yard filled with laughter, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged to a family. Not because of blood, but because of kindness, without conditions. Family, I realized, isn't a place that demands your sacrifice. True family is where you're allowed to be yourself, without shame, without having to apologize for choosing your own path. Isabel's story proves that sometimes family isn't where you're born, it's where you're heard and respected. In a world that often expects women to suffer in silence, Isabel chose to stand up, set boundaries, and build a life with her own hands. She didn't seek revenge through bitterness, but through growth, peace, and true freedom. Because real happiness doesn't come from someone else's approval, it begins the moment you choose yourself, every day. What do you think about Isabel's decision? Would you have done the same in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.